Hey, Brendan.
Mike,
It's good to be with you.
it's good to be with you as well.
Here we are, and this is a podcast that we're calling Undone.
Undone. What are we doing here right now? What are we doing here? What is this?
Or another way to phrase it, what in the world are we doing here?
It's a podcast.
It is a podcast, and we figured we'd want to give the origin story before we launch this thing. And so
And maybe
here
a
we
little
are.
insight into what to expect of
Yeah.
this podcast. It's
Absolutely.
just another podcast. Because the
Oh,
world
no.
needed another podcast.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this started with just a crazy harebrained idea in my mind. And so a little bit of background, I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for several years. And one of the joys of being a pastor is I get to sit with people and hear their story. I love stories. And I especially love stories about how God has worked in people's lives. Oftentimes, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but oftentimes it's when people have gone through great hardships and struggles. And then to be able to hear how the Lord has walked along with them and maybe not, brought them out of those hardships or struggles, but in the way in which God has revealed himself throughout those struggles. And oftentimes I walk away from those conversations encouraged, strengthened in my own faith. And then usually there's a thought in my head of, boy, I wish so-and-so could hear that. Or I wish my congregation could hear that. And so some of I would say the more in-depth and encouraging ones have come from people that were at the end of life, struggling with a health issue that ended their life. And I thought to myself, man, I should have this recorded for later and for the congregation to be able to hear these, and for people even outside of my church to hear these stories of people of great faith that have faced such trials and hardships and have held on to faith and held on to Jesus. And so
How long has that been a thought in your mind?
I would say probably a good 4 to 5 years. I've always wanted to do a podcast because I've started listening to podcasts probably since the invention of podcasts. Like I'm talking like 2005, 2006, 2008. I don't know. Somewhere. I don't know when, but
I think podcasts came about with the invention of the iPod.
Yes.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, whether it was sermons or teachings or something like that, I was listening, and of course that ventured into other, different genres of podcasts. But I've always wanted to do one. But this was the one that I thought, man, this would be, I think, beneficial and encouraging for people to hear our stories of faith, and kind of get to a little bit of insight of, when it comes to being a pastor and some of the stories and things that I get to hear. And it's one of the best parts of being a minister, being a pastor. I mean, that's basically why I do what I do, is to be able to hear and engage and listen to people in the way that the Lord's worked in their lives. So
It's a privileged role.
it's a privileged role in that sense. So that's the brainchild of it. But
There's always a but.
when it comes to actually execution, that's where I was a bit reluctant, because having to learn a skill and all these things that I didn't really feel like I had the energy or time to dive into and to do it well. And I wanted, if I was going to bring people in and interview them in that way, I would want it done well. And so, about a couple of months ago,
Yeah. We're at a mutual friend's house. Yeah.
we're having a conversation, and that's where I'll hand it off to you.
So, interestingly, we were at a mutual friend's house celebrating another friend who was going through some trials. And at the end of that night, I was just venting with you, my friend, Pastor Mike, who I just call Mike.
Which is totally what you need to call me, is Mike.
It'd be really weird
I don't need the
if I
title.
always addressed you as Pastor.
Right. No, thank you. Please don't.
So we've been friends for, I don't know, the better part of 15 years, I'd say.
Yep.
And so from time to time as friends, we tend to share life with each other. And so I was venting about some professional frustrations that I have with actually a church client. And you kind of just, you heard me out. You gave me my moment to vent, and then you just totally redirected. And it was a little bit, the way I heard it was, forget about that. We need to do a podcast.
That's what you heard.
That's what I heard.
That's interesting.
And it was like, none of that matters. Let's do a podcast. And I said, what is this podcast you talk of? And then you kind of pitched it, right? Just as you just did. And you said, and by the way, we need to kind of hurry on this because there's someone whose health is not the best right now, or what it could be, and we may not have a lot of time. Will you join me in this pursuit of capturing these stories and sharing them with people? And so I'm naturally wired to hyper-analyze every opportunity that comes before me and contemplate it for very extended period of time, because when I do something, I give it my all, right? So, but in this instance, I didn't hesitate. I think I just instantly said yes.
Well, you kind of lit a fire under my chair. You did. Because, I kind of threw it out there, and it was actually out of regret, because I know where your talents lie. And it's in things like this. And so, and that was your job as well. So I think we were in that realm of talking about
some of that
media, social media, podcasting.
So for our listeners, I'll just say, so I own a small company that, I do media production stuff. So film production, web development, it's marketing, but it's film production, web development, audio production,
all of it,
all that stuff. And so, I've been fortunate to acquire some skills over time, and that's what I do. That's what I bring to the table here. But as part of that work in producing films, I also sit and have conversations with people. So a lot of what I do in film production, I try to take an approach that is sort of not scripted, authentic, approachable. And so when I interview people for documentary style films, we sit down and literally just have a conversation that's unscripted. And that has blessed me with the gift of being able to ask, I think, generative questions of people in a way that
helps them tell their story.
Exactly. And they don't necessarily expect. So one of the taglines I've come up with is like, I help you tell your story in ways you never thought you could.
Yes.
And so that's a gift that I have. And
me being a person who loves to hear stories, and like I said, I get to hear these stories often with sitting down with people.
Yeah.
It came to that moment where I wanted to share, and I felt like I came across as sharing a regret. Brendan, this is one of my regrets.
I didn't hear that at all. I heard, hey man, we need to do a podcast and we need to do it now. Are you in?
Well, that's
it wasn't
maybe
forceful.
what you
It wasn't
heard.
forceful.
No.
It was
you
passion.
said, Mike, why don't you do that? And I said, because I have no motivation.
Oh, so I just completely omitted that part of the conversation. That happened.
And what you're like is, no, this needs to happen. And I'm like, let's do it. Like, I think we kind of fed off of each other.
Maybe.
And because, like I said, I think you lit a fire underneath me where I'm like, let's do this, and got me going. And I think part of that too was, I know that you have expertise in the technical side of things, but also a skill set in the sense of interviewing people or asking the right questions for them to tell their story. And and that would be a perfect fit, and the various perspectives that we have, especially when it comes to faith and hearing people's testimonies of the way in which God has worked. I've been a follower of Jesus for a very long time, and maybe have a very set framework of how to think and talk and speak and things like that. And I think you will be able to help with a wider range of audience.
Yeah, because I've been on the other end of the spectrum maybe not on the other end of the spectrum, but I've been a very reluctant seeker. So there's a period of my life where I was extremely cynical. I had gone through some pain, and some suffering, and didn't understand the purpose behind that, and just thought it was meaningless, and questioned the meaning of suffering.
Yeah.
Like if you think of it in terms of Calvinism and everything is ordained, right? Well, how does that make sense? So I struggled with that for a long time and used it as a crutch to keep faith at arm's length. But at the same time, I'm also just this crazy curious person, right? As a kid, right? My parents had an encyclopedia, a set of like whatever it was, 28 volumes of actual physical encyclopedia. And when I learned how to
physical books,
those things. That's how old we are. So when I learned what that was, right, like I started using it, which is really weird. Like as a kid, but that's curiosity. I was just curious about a lot of things. So, anyways, I've always been curious about faith, and it's really simple for me. It boils down to like in terms of motivation on the front end. It's really simple, right? When you die, what happens? And people would ask me that question, and they say, well, what do you want to happen? And I would say, well, of course, right? If there's a heaven, I'd like to be at that party. That sounds like the best option.
I'd like to be the DJ at the party.
Yeah. And so I was always curious, but I was also always curious about people who had salvation and who had a relationship with the Lord. And I always struggle with it because I've kind of been a cynic, right? And I'll say, most of my friends are people who follow the Lord, people who walk with the Lord.
How did that happen?
I think it's just 'cause, again, I there's a curiosity, but also, I mean, like, I don't know. You would say that's
I would say that the Lord's at work.
Yeah,
He's throwing these people in front of you,
and so historically, and I would try to take credit for that, right? But I'm not at the opposite end of the spectrum anymore. I've moved along the continuum. But I think the beautiful thing about the notion of this podcast is wherever you are on the spectrum, these stories will show you that no one has arrived, right? No one has it all figured out. There is struggle, there is doubt, there is pain, and it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum. Those we all have that in common, right? And there's nothing that divides people in terms of their lived experience. The only thing that's different is how you process it, and if you lean on the Lord for that or not. And so I think the part of the goal here is, if you don't have a relationship with the Lord, if you don't have a faith, or if you're cynical or struggling with that, lean into these stories with an open mind. And I think what I found, right, as a cynic is like, it has helped me to soften my heart. We by the way, we should say, we've already recorded a few of these episodes.
Right. Yeah.
But just in that short period of time, it has helped me to soften my heart, to quiet my mind, and to really lean in by virtue of the vulnerability that these folks have shown, the stories that they've shared, and it has helped me to put my own struggles in perspective. I mean, in many ways, I hear these stories, these trials, and I say, what is my problem? Like,
right.
So I love that. I feel blessed to be a part of it, but at the same time, I'm still not fully there. Right? I haven't arrived. It's a journey.
Hmm.
I still struggle. I still have barriers,
Hmm.
and so I think it's really interesting because on one side of the room we have a pastor, and on the other side of the room we have me. It's kind of like floundering, and then we have this person who sits in the middle, who is walking us through their journey. And I just love the poetry behind that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so
There's
yeah.
there, and I think it's just really helpful to have, at least for me, also to have a different perspective or just a different uh, place of asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in my uh, being a pastor for so long, maybe I have these stock questions that have in my back pocket, that I just bring out every time. But I think it's really important to come and ask different questions, or ask them in different ways that just causes people to think differently about their own testimony or story. And I would say that's one of the things that maybe another way of looking at it is, in scripture, it talks about this great cloud of witnesses that have come before us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of the idea. But I think the word that is helpful is that they're witnesses. And there's a passage in Hebrews that says there's a great cloud of witnesses that have come before. Therefore, because of these great cloud of witnesses, run the race well.
Mm.
And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I think what's really cool here is, we call them testimonies, and people have, I would say, a certain idea of what that means.
Mm.
And hopefully this podcast actually broadens that, because, when we're talking about testimony, or what they're doing is they're a witness to what God has done in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's maybe before they became Christians, or it's how they became a Christian, but it could also very well be what the Lord's doing after they've been walking this walk for a long time. Because I think that the one thing that it's good to understand is that when you become a Christian, it doesn't just all of a sudden your life becomes, roses and candy canes. It's still life with all of life's challenges and struggles and hardships, and those things continue. And but the Lord, the wonderful thing is when you're following the Lord, and you could probably give some testimony to this as well, but you begin to see, your eyes are open in the way in which the Lord is working even through those hardships.
Sure. Yeah.
Which
Absolutely.
brings us to the title of our podcast, which is Undone. And I love the name, and I could say that because I wasn't the one that necessarily came up with it. This was a list of names that you came up with, and this was one. And I think we both really
It
leaned
resonated.
in. Yeah, it resonated with both of us. But the passage that you found to really connect with the title of Undone
Mm-hmm.
for this podcast, share that with us a little bit.
I think here's what happened, right? You gave me your pitch, which you've just shared.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was trying to figure out a framework for it. Like, what does this look like?
Yeah.
And how do we do this? And then I kind of thought, like, okay, I think there's 3 acts to every episode, right? I think you have the period of life before salvation, before you came to know the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
before you came to faith. And then you have the moment of salvation, which is like kind of the crack, or the, something that, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. And then you have life after, which consists of doubts and more trials and, all these things. And what was really fascinating to me was I always thought of the crack as like the climax of the
Mm-hmm.
story, kind of the most important part. And that's where the woe is me for I am undone
Mm-hmm.
came into the equation.
Yeah.
But what I've realized and what I think working through this framework has taught me is it's actually the other parts that are the important parts. And the crack is kind of trivial because the crack amounts to, it's a brief moment of clarity and a compulsion to just surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy. Like that work has already been done for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That ground has been laid before
Yeah.
you. But your journey, your trials, your struggles before the moment of salvation and after the moment of salvation, life doesn't change too much. Like the struggles don't change. They
Right.
still come.
Right.
It's just how you process it is slightly different. But regardless of where you are in the continuum, your work, your journey, your story is undone.
Mm-hmm.
It's never finished. Your work is never finished. You have to constantly go back to the well. As a pastor, you don't have all the answers. You haven't figured it out. Your life isn't perfect and rosy, right? So you have to go back to the well. Your work is undone. And you've also been undone by
Right.
the trials of life, right? And that's everyone's story.
Yeah.
Everyone has that.
Yes.
And some of us turn away from the Lord in those moments of struggle, and some of us turn toward the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your hope with this podcast is that it will inspire and encourage more people to turn toward the Lord. And then even after they have salvation,
Yeah. Oh,
to
absolutely.
continue to turn toward the Lord because they're still going to be tested. I've said for years, I figured this out through my own struggles, right? I mentioned earlier my struggles. And for the longest time, I leveraged that to turn away. And then at a point, I figured out, I think the Lord uses trials to get our attention, right? He'll kind of meet us where we are. And if he needs to get your attention, he can kind of slap you in the face.
Yep.
And you can turn away or you can turn toward him. And if you turn away, he's going to pursue you. And he'll slap you harder.
Yeah.
That's kind of been
Absolutely.
my experience and what I've seen other people's experience. And so I think that's it, right? Regardless of where you are in the continuum, your work is undone. And then there's this moment of being undone. And that's the inspiration for the title.
Yeah. So, and what you drew out, which I think is really important for our listeners to hear, is that oftentimes, and this has been my experience because being a pastor, being a Christian for a long time, we hear this catchphrase, it's, what's your testimony?
Mm.
And so when people hear that, I hear this all the time because we ask people for various reasons to give their testimony. And there's a lot of people that go, well, my testimony isn't that great.
Yeah.
Meaning there wasn't this moment.
Yeah.
Where, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people with various walks with the Lord that started very early on. So there wasn't this, story of, being in prison for 15 years or whatever.
Some climax.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's the Paul story where, he's persecuting the church and then he's struck blind and the voice of Jesus, not everyone has that kind of story. But the interesting thing, and like Isaiah, right? Isaiah has this vision, and basically it's the picture of he comes before the Lord. He experiences the presence of God. That's what it is. There's a moment where you experience the presence of God. It could be before you trusted in him. It could be after you trusted in him, but you have been brought before him in some way, and it stripped you, right? That's the undone. I have nothing. It's just, I'm before this God. And then Isaiah's response to that is, woe is me, I am undone, a man of unclean lips. So he sees who God is, he sees who he is. And then what's really cool is you see God's mercy by bringing a coal. An angel brings a coal and he burns his lips, and it's purifying Isaiah. And it's this picture of, even through the trials and the hardships, where God is, a lot of times what he's doing there is stripping away everything around so that it's just you and him. And in that, there's grace and mercy. And so it's coming before a gracious and loving God and actually realizing, oh, he is a gracious and loving God. And I hopefully, and I think we've already experienced that when we've heard these witnesses share
absolutely.
their testimonies of the Lord working in their lives. I think that rises to the surface.
Absolutely. And everybody's journey is unique.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody gets there differently. It's not all about a religious experience or a specific moment in time.
Right.
It's the journey. And so that's the whole idea. It's undone. It's always undone. It's a constant pursuit. And it's not just one moment. It's countless moments all compiled together that shape your story and shape your walk with the Lord. And I've learned that now by virtue of this journey. And I hope it inspires others to sort of embrace that idea as well.
And I think the word that you captured there is journey.
Yeah.
And the scriptures describe it in another way that might be helpful. And so we always think of your salvation story. And so it's like, hey, how did God bring you to salvation? But the scriptures don't necessarily talk about it like that. It actually says you have been saved, past. You are being saved. It'll describe it in the present tense, ongoing. And it also describes it as you will be saved. And so even, Paul in his letters will use those different tenses when he's talking about salvation. And I think it helps us kind of form this understanding that it is a journey. And it's this transformation that God is doing and forming us into a greater likeness of Jesus. But it's undone until we're with him in glory. And that's what the kind of journey that we get to hear when we bring people in this podcast.
So, Mike, you've cited scripture here a few times. For those people in our audience who maybe are a little uncomfortable with faith, aren't quite there yet, is this going to be a sermon every episode? Is this, what can they expect? How would you help them approach this?
Well, just for the listeners to know, Brendan has strapped me to a taser. And so anytime I start getting preachy, because I am a pastor, and so of course, token pastors, they get preachy. So if ever I start getting preachy, he's just going to shock me and hopefully it'll stop. But here's the point. No, this is not supposed to be a sermon or get all preachy. What we want is a conversation with someone who is able to share, and be a little vulnerable, but to be able to share their story of the way in which the Lord has revealed himself to them. And to hear that. And for me, like I said, it's always so encouraging. It fills my cup to hear about what the Lord's done in people's lives. And so hopefully you will be able to, as a listener, be able to catch that as well. And of course, there will be times, because when it comes to scripture and things like that, like those are usually the things that kind of light me up, is they'll share something and I'll be able to connect it with, man, this is exactly what Paul says, or this is what Jesus says, or whatever it is from the scriptures. But also I'll probably bring up, books or other people that I've heard stories of, and I'm sure that you will too. So hopefully it won't get preachy in that sense.
Yeah. And let's just acknowledge that it is 2026. And when you launch a podcast in 2026, it's very uncommon to launch a podcast in 2026 without a video version of that podcast.
Absolutely.
And I just want to address why there will not be a video portion of this podcast. First of all, it's so you don't have to see Mike strapped to the table with the taser.
And I have a face for audio,
and I need plausible deniability on how I torture you.
Yeah.
But no, actually, so there's a really good reason we don't have a video version of this, right? These are really deep, personal, vulnerable conversations we're asking people to have with us. And as a film producer, I can tell you that when I sit down with people and put lights on them and a camera in their face, that's a barrier for some people. And they have a harder time opening up. I mean, it's difficult enough with a microphone in front of you. But if you put lights and cameras on people, I think it elevates the barrier and it makes it a little bit more challenging for people to open up and be vulnerable. So that's one reason. And the other reason is, I think at least my vision, I won't speak for you, Mike, but my vision is as people are consuming this content, I imagine sitting kind of quietly in a corner or, somewhere peacefully and just almost closing your eyes, eliminating all your distractions and just using this medium as an opportunity to allow the Lord to reveal himself to you through these people's stories. And I think if there's a video, that can be a distraction. And I think just hearing the voice allows you to more easily put yourself in the shoes of these people who've also walked with the Lord, but who've also been challenged. And so, it's kind of like, it's a different experience if you read a book versus if you watch the movie.
Yeah.
If you read the book, you kind of invent the movie and you put yourself in the movie. And I think there's a similar phenomenon when you just hear the words versus see what somebody else intended for you to see. So I don't know. That's kind of how I've thought about it. But yeah, that at least for now, there won't be a video version of this this podcast. That could be our that could be our undoing. I don't know.
We could be undone because
yeah.
No, I appreciate that. And again, I think podcasts are my favorite form of media. And so I love listening and hearing, and I could always bring this back to scripture as well. In the Hebrew tradition in the Old Testament, they didn't have video. So it's very interesting when you say that you understand something. Oh, I see. And that's a very Greek way of thinking.
Yeah.
Platonic kind of idea. And, if you go into philosophy and stuff like that. But anyways, but we use that kind of language. But back then, it wasn't. It was about hearing. Hearing and understanding were very similar. And if you think about it, what kind of form of entertainment did they have? They would sit around someone that was older, and they would share stories. They would share stories of the history of the traditions that they received from their family members, and so it was a very listening culture. And so anyways, I appreciate that, and I've found myself leaning more towards that, I would say, genre of media.
It is your media of choice.
It is my media of choice. So maybe it's not sitting in a chair in the dark or closing your eyes. Maybe for me, it's, doing something like washing dishes. It doesn't take too much thought and engagement, but on the lawnmower, driving, on the highway,
wherever you meditate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Contemplative time. So I just have one other curiosity, Mike. So this is your vision. This was you birthed this. Then I filled in the blanks. As you look out into the future, and let's say we're successful with keeping this thing going for a year or two, what do you hope this does for people?
Yeah.
What do you hope the effect is of this?
Well, again, yeah. So the whole thought behind it was, I think it's 2 or 3 thoughts here, or goals or hopes. One is, walking away or stepping away from people that have shared their story. I'm like, you know what? There's people in my congregation. So this is maybe you could say a bit selfish in the sense of they need to know these people. They need to know each other, and just to encourage one another, to know one another within the congregation. The other one is there's people that struggle in very similar ways, and these testimonies of the way in which God can work through and in people can strengthen people's faith. And so whether it's within the church that I'm oversee, or if it's another church and other believers around the world, they can hear of fellow believers that, maybe go through similar struggles and go, you know what, that's inspiring, and it helps me in my walk with the Lord. But I think another one too, and I think you've helped me with this, and you spoke into this as we were kind of teasing this out, and that is, there's people along the way, and people that might be interested in faith or a little bit more curious about it. And maybe there's some opportunities for the Lord to work to draw people closer to himself and to reveal him in such a way where they become followers of Jesus. And I think that could be, something that this podcast could be helpful in as well. So I think those are my prayers, my hopes, and what this can be.
Yeah. So I'll share 2 last things. So
Okay.
the first is, logistically, our plan is to drop 1 new episode each week once we get rolling here. And if you think your story is one you'd like to share on Undone, you can submit your story through our website. And that is at Undone Pod. It's UNDONEPOD.com. And just click share your story. There's a little form on there you can fill out, and you can share your story with us, and then we'll get in touch with you. And then the other thing is, if you, let's say 6 months down the road, we've done this for a while, if you feel compelled to help us, to support this work, because we're not backed by some, giant conglomerate, or like, this is just a couple of guys in a room, right?
I pulled some coins out of my couch, and
and I pull a few out of mine.
Yeah.
But if you feel compelled to support this podcast, if you feel like this podcast is ministering to you, or you can also do that at our website. So, I don't know what else, Mike. What else has not been said here? I think we've captured it.
I think we've captured it. I think we've said enough. And
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm very excited.
Yeah. I've teased this out to a handful of people, and man, I think people are just going to be. I think they're just going to be blessed by this.
Yeah.
I think people are going to come together.
One more, I'll say something that a bit selfish in doing this podcast is there will be times when I come home and my kid will be like, "What do you do all day?" No, but what will happen is they'll be like, "Hey, how was your day?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, so-and-so, I got to meet with them and talk with them." And they're like, "Who?" And I'm like, so-and-so, well, who? And then I have to describe them. Oh, yeah, I know who that is. And I'm like, oh, they have this amazing story. And of course, I can never tell it like they shared it. So they don't get the experience that I get, where I'm just excited and pumped about what I heard. And then I'm terrible at retelling those things. And so this maybe selfishly is like, you know what, when my kids ask, they get a picture or they get to hear an example of exactly what I'm talking about, when I get to come home all, encouraged and full of joy, sharing these stories.
And now you can just send them the link.
Yep. What'd you do today, Dad? Here's a link.
Yeah. So once we start publishing these episodes, wherever you're hearing this episode right now, that's where the episodes will appear. We'll be on all the podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcast, we'll be there. And our hope is to keep this free to the public and allow everybody to access it with no barriers, and hope that it lifts you up, encourages you, and we're excited to have this journey with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and share it with your friends.
Share it with your friends.
I'm old school, so I do the old URL copy thing and then
paste it in a text
message and send it off to a group of people.
You can also find us on Instagram at Undone Pod as well. So anyways, I think that's it for now, Mike. We will look forward to dropping our first episode shortly, and hope you follow along on that journey with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.